to appease the mounting tension here in the capital and across the country. Al Jazeera understands that President Ali Abdullah Saleh has had a crucial meeting with the clerics of Yemen in the presidential palace, and he told them that within 24 hours from now he will announce a national unity government, and that even if the opposition decides not to join him in this government, he will contact independent personalities and invite them to join this national unity government that would lay down the ground for dramatic constitutional reforms, to be able to enact new reforms in the future, new election code, constitutional changes, and also presidential elections to be held in the future. However, I've just spoken with a senior opposition figure who told Al Jazeera that they reject this offer of national unity government by President Ali Abdullah Saleh, and that it's too little, too late, and that the call now is for radical change of the whole political establishment in Yemen, not just a national unity government.
Okay, thank you very much. Hashim Ahelbar reporting there on the line from Sana'a in Yemen. My colleague David Foster will have more for you on the situation in Yemen, Egypt and Libya coming up in just a few minutes here on Al Jazeera. From me, Fuli Batibo, thanks for watching.
March on Al Jazeera. In 2009, Al Jazeera visited the cities worst affected by the financial downturn. Now, 2 years later, we return as European leaders discuss the debt crisis.
In a new 8-part series, Al Jazeera looks at women's rights and maternal health, real women and their personal stories.
It's 20 years since the Arab League held its annual summit in Iraq. An Al Jazeera News special has full coverage from Baghdad.
Branded a lunatic by some and an inspirational revolutionary by others, Al Jazeera follows the controversial Norman Finkelstein.
A popular uprising that shook the country to its core. A defiant president under siege from his people. As the protesters took charge of the streets, we look back at the events that are changing Egypt.
I will stay on the air if I can until the police come
in a special program, Al Jazeera gives you a day-by-day account from those that witnessed them firsthand. Egypt burning, at this time on Al Jazeera.
From local traders to international finance, it's commerce that makes the world go round. For global companies and developing markets, communication is the currency, and information is the most valuable commodity. Counting the cost at this time on Al Jazeera.
The lives that go unnoticed. The reality of addiction. The truth that is ignored. Stories of inspiration. 101 East brings you the lives of the people of Asia and how their stories shape the future of the region. 101 East, at this time on Al Jazeera.
As protests, violence, and the call for political reform spreads across the Arab world, Al Jazeera's in-depth coverage of events on the ground brings you the news as it breaks. Ongoing coverage of the Libya uprising on Al Jazeera.
Egypt's public prosecutor imposes a travel ban on former President Hosni Mubarak and his family. He's also ordered the freezing of all of their financial assets in the country. Good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. David Foster, live from Doha. Also in this programme, Gaddafi's son appears to arm his supporters as a town near Tripoli braces for a brutal fight back by Libyan troops. The Human Rights Council in crisis mode, with Western leaders saying Gaddafi must go. And Tunisia gets a new interim prime minister. Enough to satisfy the protesters or not? It's all happened within the last 35 minutes or so, but Egypt's public prosecutor has now issued a travel ban on the former president, Hosni Mubarak, and his family. It is said pending further investigations, and he's ordered a freeze on all of their financial interests inside the country. This follows a previous order to freeze the family's financial assets abroad. Mubarak's the most high-profile, the most senior official of the previous regime to have a travel ban imposed. So let's go to Anita McNaught live in Cairo for us. Apart from the obvious, which is that he can't leave the country and he can't take any money out, what does this mean?
Well, it means he's isolated, and it means that some of the rumors that were circulating around Cairo, that in fact the government had moved quietly to Sharm el-Sheikh, and that Hosni Mubarak was quietly conducting a covert control of the country from his palace down in Jolie Vie down there, cannot be true, because the man clearly has been pushed back. Now, I was asked earlier who had laid the complaints that had led to the Prosecutor General's actions. It's impossible to know who directly has done it, because no one person's evidence is cited in this. But what Egyptian radio has been doing ever since Hosni Mubarak stepped down is to run a regular broadcast with a number of phone numbers at a call center you can ring if you have any evidence, complaints, problems, issues with members of the former ruling administration. So these complaints against Hosni Mubarak could have come from grassroots level, or they could have come from something much higher. All in all likelihood, a combination of them all. But what is clear here is that allegations that the former president was still in some degree in control, and also suspicions that the military were protecting him, seem not to be true. In fact, the military had a few days ago issued a statement saying he was most definitely not running things from down in the south, and it would seem that whoever was behind this particular act by the prosecutor, the military, if they were not directly involved in it, certainly have not acted to stop this.
Very often in certain jurisdictions you issue what's known as a holding charge. It allows you time to look into other things as well. Is that effectively what's happening here? Is they're saying, look, you can't leave the country, you can't touch your money, because really we're after you for other things as well?
That would seem to be the pattern. If we look at the pattern of investigations, travel bans, followed by prosecutions of the 4 other government ministers who so far have been subjected to increasing and escalating action from the General Prosecutor's Office, it starts exactly this way. And yesterday we heard we got a court trial date for the former Interior Minister. March the 5th is the date that he stands trial for money laundering and abuse of public funds, but we've since discovered today that he is now also under investigation for his handling of the security situation during the protests, those severe police crackdowns, the police, of course, being part of his responsibility, and the security vacuum that followed, that, of course, was filled with violent chaos when he made the decision to withdraw the police. So, yes, this is exactly the situation, David, that these things are set in place, the people concerned are immobilized, and then certainly more minds are brought to bear on this, and more serious charges emerge in the wake.
Now, speculate on this. It's a hypothetical at the moment, and even if it happens, it's a long way down the road. But while many of the protesters might be happy to see Mubarak in court, there would be those who might find it a bit of an embarrassment, not only within Egypt, but also outside the country.
Well, indeed, and he would be the first Arab leader since Saddam Hussein to be prosecuted, if this was the case. But, you know, all the way along there have been not only efforts by the military to maintain a shred of Hosni Mubarak's dignity. The military issued a statement after he stepped down, reminding everyone that he had been an eminent commander of the armed forces and that he had served his country well. A reminder not to humiliate him too grievously. And of course, behind him, the protesters have a strong voice for Egypt now, but there are many people who respect him, who admire him, who feel that his departure is a loss to Egypt's stature and status. So there will be many people who are concerned at the precedents that are being set by this. Not every Egyptian will be happy to see this.
Anita, you talked about the court date, March the 5th, for the former Interior Minister. Now we've got this travel ban and assets freeze within Egypt on Hosni Mubarak. What about the other side of this equation, those who've now taken over, the military council, the setting of the new rules for the constitution? In terms of progressing to a new society, what point is Egypt at?
Transitional, very transitional. The protesters are meeting on a regular basis with the military. And what's interesting is that every time something goes wrong in the country, for example, the attacks we saw overnight on the night of Friday into Saturday morning here, where military police cracked down with disproportionate force on a small number of protesters in Tahrir Square, not only was there an apology issued by the military in the wake of that, but then there were meetings held between protesters and military to try and ensure that nothing like this happened again. And there seems to be also regular policy initiatives coming out from the protesters when they meet with the military to try and move things forward. The constitutional amendments, yes, an improvement, but many people still believe in Egypt that the constitution is fundamentally wrong, has to be torn up and completely redrawn. But a small committee of 7 eminent people can't do that. That needs to be done by an elected committee to have authority. But will the next elections provide an electoral body that has sufficient confidence of the people to do that? It's all tremendously in flux.
Thanks very much, Anita. You may care to listen to this because we're going to talk now to Dr. Essam Al-Arian, who's from the Egyptian opposition movement, that is the Muslim Brotherhood. Dr. Al-Arian, tell me first of all, when you heard that Mubarak was going to be served with a travel ban and that his assets within Egypt were going to be frozen, what was your first thought?
First of all, that is a good step in the right direction, because we need a decision, determination, good intentions from the army to have a cut with the fall regime. The people are till now seem to be not sincerely that the army has a cut with the decision, with the past regime, and a new order, a new regime must be built. It is something of hesitation between saving some figures of the failed regime and to have a new era. The people are calling for building a new Egypt, a new political scene, to have a very tight cut with the past. Now Mubarak seems to be tried as an ordinary citizen, to be brought to the justice. This is very, very important. It is not enough at all to give the people impression that we can have some figures, Minister of Interior, Minister of the radio and the television, others of something like this, and lift the big boss, who gives them the order, who gives the Ministry of Interior the order to kill people in the street, who gives the army the same order and the army don't obey him, who gives the people the impression that all this corruption was controlled by Mubarak and his family. This is very, very important.
Thank you.
It must be come to end, brought to justice. Everybody who are responsible for this country in the past three decades, that he is responsible for killing people, torturing people, jailing people, arresting people, and stealing the resources and the wealth of this country.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Arian from the Muslim Brotherhood. Here we see in Geneva the EU's Foreign Affairs representative, Catherine Ashton, one assumes, talking as so many others have done, about events in Libya.
I'm pleased that last Friday this Council held a special session on Libya, showing an ability to react to events in real time. It was striking and welcome that this came about because so many groups had mobilised for it, from Asia, from Latin America, as well as Eastern and Western Europe. This is the United Nations at its best. The outcome last Friday was a strong one. I'm pleased that the Council concluded to form an independent international inquiry and also backed work underway in New York to suspend the membership of Libya of this Council. These are important steps, but more is clearly needed. This morning, too, the message is clear. We condemn the grave human rights violations being committed in Libya. The violence and the repression must stop. Those responsible must be held to account. Not just a European position, but the view of the international community and its highest authority, the UN Security Council. On Saturday, the security